I'll tell you, we're living in some strange times. By the time most of us have learned the language of our culture or region, wherever we're from, we pretty much accept that that's it. We understand communication now. We're all set. We're good to go. But we miss something. One thing we're not taught in school, or in culture in general, is that there's many languages. There's a lot of other languages taking place all around us right now that most people don't see. This all goes back to the secrets of the Freemasons or the Illuminati, these secrets that have been kept for years and years and years with all these secret societies, kept away from mass consumption. Well, these secrets are being revealed more and more. There is a language of symbols, and most times words mean something. Well, they mean more than something. They have hidden meanings. Check this out. This is an actual picture from Siberia in northern Russia. Just overnight, this over 260-foot hole just opened up. Russia is actually in the process right now of sending scientists out there to try to figure out what this is, where it came from, why it exists, where does it go. But the thing about this story that really stood out for me, it goes back to what we were just talking about, with sometimes words mean more than what you think. The actual town that this took place in is translated to, get this, the end of the world. Speaking of words and how oftentimes words are played off of each other, there's a history with a lot of our words that most people don't even understand. Right, here's a great example of that. This is Sobek, the crocodile god. Now, where else have you seen Sobek in your local stores? That's right, Sobe. So I like to follow the patterns, I like to follow the symbols, I like to follow the signs. I wanted to share this story with you. It's very interesting to me because it's right in line with a lot of the other videos I've made covering very similar subjects. What you're looking at here is the first poster to come out for the new Will Smith movie. It's going to be called Redemption of Cain. Now they're actually filming it, from what I understand right now, this summer. It's supposed to go into production, so it should be out within a year or so. But what's really interesting about this whole movie to me is it's the idea that they're actually adding a vampiric twist to the story. And you can look some of this up for yourself. I'm sure there'll probably be a trailer out in a few months or whatever, but apparently the twist is going to be that Cain is going to have something to do with vampires, and it all has to do with that serpent bloodline. It's very interesting. As I said, I've covered this subject in many other videos before. This goes back to the whole idea of the fallen angels. There's also the idea of the seed of Cain. And then we're also looking at things or ideas such as the wheat and the tares, which tells us that there's a separate race among us. Now, is that all just a metaphor for demonic possession or for evil people and wickedness and things like this? Possibly, that these things can have multiple explanations, I believe. But it's interesting because we keep seeing the same theme coming up. So recently we had the Noah movie come out, and of course that was more of a Gnostic gospel, which is anti-Christian, okay? Now we have a lot of these biblical movies kind of popping up, and this is going to be another one, but it's going to do the same thing that Noah did. It's going to take the original story, it's going to twist it, it's going to distort it. But I'm also very curious because I wonder if they're going to actually be, in some ways, telling us more truth in this movie than what we've been led to believe. And that's one thing I find really interesting about our world and our reality in general, is that we're living at a time right now where we actually, I feel, get more truth from things such as movies and television shows than we do in schools and from our history books and things like this. If we just open our eyes and look in the right places, we find proof all throughout our history of this other race, some kind of a serpent race living among us. What's really fascinating is that there is a history of this serpent race. It's been recorded for as long as anything's been recorded, but we find it coming up in every culture. We find it in hieroglyphs, we find it with the Incas, we find it in media, we find it in movies and science fiction and television shows, but we see it everywhere. This goes back to that hidden history that we've talked about on my channel before. This goes back to the idea that we were never really told everything. we've been given a little bit of history in these government schools and whatnot, just enough to kind of get you by. But there's so much more going on. This same serpent race comes up all over the place. You can call it the wheat and the tares. Call them the tares if you'd like. You can call them the seed of Cain. You can call them an alien race among us. You know, whatever label you want to put on it. The devil's seed line. You can also look into the research of, I believe it's Rh negative, maybe it is, but there's a certain kind of blood type that most of the elites share, and the royals. So check that out as well. But this all ties in with the same idea, the same theme. So all that being said, I want you to check this out. It's always interesting to notice the synchronicities with different stories and symbols and all these things. But I think that we have to have these synchronicities to know that we're onto something. These connections, they seem to fall into place. So it wasn't long ago, just a few weeks back, this story came out that Jaden and Will Smith's kids, like to sleep with snakes. They sleep with serpents. Now again, I think that's all out there for a reason. It all falls right in line with the movie he's making about the serpent race. You kind of see the connection there? But at the same time, I found another story in the same week that I want to share with you, and I think it's very interesting. Check this out. This is a story out of Ecuador, and it has to do with some of the most important relics to our human history ever. But of course, like most things of real importance, most people had never heard about this stuff. But you should look up Father Carlo Crespi, C-R-E-S-P-I. Crespi, many years ago, discovered these things out there in Ecuador, these different relics, these pictures and things like this, and garnered lots of interest throughout the years. A lot of professors have been out there, scientists, checking all this stuff out. It's all legit. It's very interesting because they find direct connections between the artwork and the different relics and whatnot to Babylon, connecting Babylon all the way with pre-Inca civilizations. And they find a lot of similar things on these relics that we're kind of speaking of, serpentine type things and whatnot. Check this out right here. They're just talking about some of the artwork and whatnot, but it says, everything that the Indians brought me from the tunnels dates to before Christ. Most of the symbols and prehistoric representations are older than the flood. Father Crespi has partially stacked his metal plaques by motifs, for example those with pictures of pyramids. I took a close look at more than 40, and some of them are reproduced in this book. All the pyramid engravings have four things in common. A sun, but more frequently several suns, is depicted above the pyramid. So we have the pyramid and the sun, and here's the fun part. Snakes are always flying next to or over the pyramid. Animals of various kinds are always present. So here we have the sun, we have the pyramid symbol, of course, which is the obvious Illuminati and also Freemason symbol. And now we've got the serpents flying around right next to it. So this goes back to that serpent race we're speaking of. Check out some of the artwork now. So here's Father Crespi with one of the relics. And here's another one. It's actually a golden helmet. And at the very top of the golden helmet, looks like we have a crocodile. And this was a stone carving they found. Now, you've probably done some research on some of this. If not, look into some of the Greek creatures, the Greek monsters, the griffin, things like that. So this reminds me of, and to me all that goes back to the interbreeding with the fallen angels and mixing different DNAs and creating different kinds of creatures. We know that same thing's happening actually right now in our world today. Look up Montauk Project to begin with, or any one of these random weird monsters that wash up on the beach all across the world any given month. So there's that, and here's another one that's fairly similar. This was another one of the stone carvings found there. The bottom part doesn't come out very well, but at the very bottom it looks like the person's actually wearing shoes. So we have another kind of human creature hybrid, and it looks like some kind of serpent thing happening there with him. Here's a gold plate, had some strange hieroglyphics on it, and at the very bottom had the snake. It looks like a two-headed snake on both ends. And this is from another large gold And this piece right here shows some of what they were speaking of earlier with the actual pyramids and the suns and the snakes up there at the top flying around. Here's another photo of another one of the gold plates. Here it looks like some kind of a ruler, and they are surrounded by serpents. Here's another photo of another gold plate with, of course, another flying serpent up there. It looks like somebody wearing something similar to one of those wacky fish pope hats we've all come to love so much. So there you have it, you guys. And I'll stop here. This is another carved stone artifact showing another one of the pyramids with hieroglyphs and then a sun at the very top. Again, a very common symbol we see with the Freemasons / Illuminati. So I'll leave it at that, folks. I just kind of wanted to show you these connections I found. I think it's interesting that Will Smith, of all people, is making this movie. It's going to be another movie about the Bible, but it's going to be twisting and distorting somewhat. Or is it? Throwing in the idea of the seed of Cain, which many of us see that as kind of a wicked seed line, but throwing the storyline in there that they're vampires as well, which makes sense. You know, vampires, demons, seed of Cain, tares, all this stuff. To me, it's all kind of the same thing, just different approaches. So I wanted to share that with you guys. Thanks so much for checking out the video, and we'll talk to you soon, alright? Take care out there, and stay prepared. We're living in some really crazy times.